The transport pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of pressurized air into the docking bay of Deep Reach 7. Kalen Vance flexed his hands nervously before grabbing his rucksack and stepping out, the distinctive metallic thud of his cybernetic legs against the deck plates drawing immediate attention. He'd expected this. It was always the same. But he had hoped that on a remote research outpost like this, populated by scientists and security personnel from a dozen different species, his prosthetics might attract less fascination. Commander Vance? A tall, willowy figure approached from the receiving area. I'm Station Director Thorne. Welcome to Deep Reach 7. Kalen accepted the director's handshake with a firm grip. Thank you, sir. Happy to be aboard. We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival. Your tactical experience will be invaluable here. Not many officers with your background willing to take a posting this remote. Director Thorne's eyes flickered briefly to Kalen's legs before returning to his face. I go where I'm needed, Kalen replied simply. He'd learned to ignore the looks. 5 years since the battle on Terrace Prime, where a pair of plasma grenades had saved his squad but cost him everything below his hips, and still people couldn't help themselves. The director gestured toward the corridor. Let me introduce you to your team. We run a tight operation here, researching the most dangerous and promising ecosystem in the sector. The planet's a gold mine of biological potential, but everything down there seems designed to kill you. As they walked, Kalen took in the outpost. Deep Reach 7 was a marvel of engineering. A state-of-the-art research facility perched on the edge of a vast canyon system on a planet that hadn't even been given a proper name yet, just the designation KX 549. Through the reinforced viewports, he could see the alien landscape spread out below, a riot of purples and reds, bizarre flora clinging to sheer rock faces, and in the distance, the silhouettes of flying creatures that seemed improbably large. Impressive view, Kalen commented. Wait until you're down there, Thorne replied. Beauty and death in equal measure. That's why your combat experience will be so valuable. Our research teams need the best protection we can provide. They arrived at a conference room where several people were gathered around a holographic display of what appeared to be a massive plant-like organism. When the door slid open, all eyes turned toward them. Everyone, this is Commander Kalen Vance, our new head of security operations, Director Thorne announced. Commander, these are your key team members. Thorne introduced them one by one. A geologist from Mars, 2 xenobiologists from different systems, a communications specialist. But it was the last introduction that caught Kalen's attention. And this is Lyra Shan, our lead field researcher and the resident expert on KX 549's predator species. Lyra was unmistakably Xylosian, tall and graceful with iridescent blue-tinted skin that seemed to shimmer subtly under the lights. Her eyes were large and entirely violet with no visible pupils. Yet somehow Kalen could feel the intensity of her gaze as she assessed him. Unlike humans, Xylosians were known for their natural agility and almost uncanny reflexes, evolutionary adaptations from their homeworld's high-gravity, predator-rich environment. Commander, she acknowledged with a slight inclination of her head. Her voice had the characteristic melodic quality of her species, but her tone was coolly professional. Specialist Shan, Kalen replied with equal formality. I've read your papers on adaptive predation strategies. Impressive work. A flicker of surprise crossed her features. You've read my research? I make it a point to study up on my assignments, Kalen said. Understanding what we're up against is half the battle. Before Lyra could respond, another voice cut in from across the room. So, they've sent us a broken soldier to keep us safe? How comforting. Kalen turned to face the speaker, a broad-shouldered, muscular Xylosian male with decorative scarification across his face, marking him as a warrior caste. He stood with arms crossed, his expression one of undisguised contempt. Zarth, Director Thorne said sharply. That's enough. Kalen held up a hand. It's fine, Director. He looked directly at Zarth. You must be the equipment specialist. I've reviewed the supply manifests you've prepared. Thorough work, though I might suggest some modifications to the emergency kits based on my experience. Zarth's eyes narrowed at being so efficiently redirected from his insult. Your experience with what? Limping around on machine legs. Zarth. Lyra's voice cracked like a whip. That's inappropriate. Kalen maintained his composure, though inwardly he felt the familiar weariness settle over him. Always the same. Always having to prove himself. My experience surviving. Situations where others didn't, he replied evenly. Which is why I'm here. Director Thorne cleared his throat uncomfortably. Commander Vance's record speaks for itself. The Terrace Prime evacuation is required study at the Academy now. Required study in what not to do, perhaps, Zarth muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Kalen ignored the comment. He'd faced worse. Much worse. I'd like to review the security protocols and recent field reports as soon as possible. And I'll need a full tour of the facility. Of course, Thorne said. Lyra, would you mind showing the commander around? You know the facility better than most, and you can brief him on the upcoming expedition plans. Lyra nodded, though Kalen caught the slight hesitation. Certainly, Director. As the meeting dispersed, Kalen found himself walking alongside Lyra down the main corridor. Her natural grace made his own mechanically assisted gait feel clumsy by comparison, though the latest upgrades to his cybernetic legs were considered the best available for combat veterans. I apologize for Zarth, Lyra said after they had walked in silence for several moments. He can be traditional in his viewpoints. You mean he thinks reliance on technology is weakness? Kalen translated. I'm familiar with the Xylosian philosophy of natural harmony. Some Xylosians, she corrected. Not all of us share such rigid perspectives. And you? Kalen asked, glancing at her. What's your perspective on soldiers with machine parts? Lyra considered this for a moment. I think adaptability is what allows any species to survive. Whether that adaptation comes through evolution or technology seems less important than its effectiveness. It wasn't quite acceptance, but it wasn't outright rejection either. Kalen would take it. The research labs are on this level, Lyra continued, changing the subject as she led him through a security door. The specimen containment facilities are designed with redundant systems. Even if primary power fails, the safety protocols remain active. For the next hour, she guided him through the facility, explaining the various research projects and security challenges. Despite her initial reserve, Kalen noticed she became increasingly animated when discussing her work, her earlier coolness giving way to genuine enthusiasm as she described the unique biological adaptations they were studying. The neural networks in these organisms are unlike anything we've seen before, she explained, showing him a specimen in a containment field. They can process environmental data and adapt their defensive mechanisms in real time. Like tactical combat systems, Kalen observed. Yes, exactly. Lyra looked at him with newfound interest. Nature developed solutions to problems we're still trying to solve with technology. Their tour was interrupted by an announcement over the station's comm system. All personnel, we have a Category 2 atmospheric disturbance approaching from the southern ridge. Secure all exterior equipment and prepare for potential system interruptions. Field teams Delta and Echo report to Docking Bay for immediate recall. Kalen glanced at Lyra. Is this common? The dust storms? Yes, but the severity varies. Category 2 is moderate, enough to interfere with communications and sensitive equipment, but not dangerous to the station's structural integrity. I should check in with security, Kalen said. Where's the operations center? I'll show you, Lyra replied, leading him toward a lift. They arrived at a bustling control room where technicians were monitoring various displays. Among them was Zarth, issuing orders to a team preparing to go outside. The sensor array on the eastern platform needs to be secured, he was saying. It wasn't properly anchored during the last maintenance cycle. I'll handle it, Kalen said, stepping forward. Zarth turned, his expression darkening. This requires speed and agility, Commander. We need to beat the storm. Then you'll want someone who doesn't tire, Kalen replied. I'll go. Your legs might short-circuit in the dust, Zarth said dismissively. We don't have time to rescue you if you break down out there. My prosthetics are rated for environments significantly harsher than a dust storm, Kalen countered. military-grade shielding. And I'm familiar with the model of sensor array you're using. I helped design security protocols for the manufacturer. Before Zarth could object further, an alarm sounded. One of the technicians called out, "Storm front accelerating. ETA 12 minutes. I'll go with Commander Vance," Lyra said suddenly. All eyes turned to her in surprise. "I need to check on my monitoring equipment in the same sector anyway." Two birds, one stone. Director Thorne, who had just entered the operations center, nodded. "Make it quick. Both of you suit up and be back inside in 10 minutes. Minutes later, Kaylin and Lyra were outside the station, making their way across the exposed platform toward the sensor array. The sky above had taken on an ominous orange hue as the dust storm approached, and the wind was already picking up, whistling through the canyon below. "Why did you volunteer to come with me?" Kaylin asked as they worked to secure the equipment. "Testing to see if I can keep up?" Lyra's expression was hidden behind her protective mask, but her voice came through the calm clearly. "Perhaps I was curious. Or perhaps I just wanted to make sure the job got done properly." "Fair enough," Kaylin replied, his cybernetic legs whirring slightly as he crouched to examine the base of the sensor array. "The anchoring mechanism is damaged. Hand me that sealant gun." As they worked together to secure the equipment, the wind continued to intensify. Loose debris began to skitter across the platform, and visibility was rapidly decreasing. "Storm's advancing faster than predicted," Lyra said, her voice tense. "We need to finish quickly." Kaylin nodded, his fingers working swiftly to complete the necessary adjustments. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind tore across the platform, ripping a panel loose from a nearby structure. It flew through the air directly toward Lyra. Without hesitation, Kaylin lunged forward. His cybernetic legs responded instantly, propelling him with more speed and precision than any natural limbs could manage. He collided with Lyra, knocking her safely aside as the metal panel whipped past them, missing them by inches. They tumbled to the deck, Kaylin instinctively positioning himself to absorb the impact. As they came to a stop, he quickly rolled off her. "Are you hurt?" Lyra stared at him, her violet eyes wide behind her mask. "No, I'm fine. That was—" "We need to get inside," he interrupted, already helping her to her feet. "Storm's almost on us." They finished securing the array in record time and made it back to the airlock just as the first heavy waves of dust engulfed the station. Inside, they removed their protective gear in silence, but Kaylin could feel Lyra watching him with new interest. "Your reaction time," she finally said. "It's exceptional." Kaylin shrugged. "The legs have some advantages. Enhanced servo motors, direct neural interface. They respond faster than natural muscles sometimes." "It wasn't just the legs," Lyra observed quietly. "It was your instinct, your decision-making." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you." Before Kaylin could respond, the door opened and Zarth entered, his expression sour. "So you made it back." "The array, secured and functional," Kaylin reported. "The anchoring mechanism needed replacement. I've logged the maintenance requirements for future reference." Zarth's eyes moved between Kaylin and Lyra, noting their disheveled appearance and the unusual intensity in Lyra's gaze. His jaw tightened. "Good. Director Thorne wants a full debrief in 10 minutes. After he left, Lyra turned to Kaylin. "He's not used to being outperformed." "I wasn't trying to outperform anyone," Kaylin said. "Just doing my job." "Well, your job just made an impression," Lyra replied with the faintest hint of a smile. "See you at the debriefing, Commander." Over the next few days, Kaylin settled into his role at Deep Reach 7. He reviewed security protocols, trained with the response teams, and began implementing improvements to the station's defensive systems. Though Zarth's animosity remained constant, manifesting in snide comments about Kaylin's special accommodations and thinly veiled suggestions that he was unsuited for field operations. Others on the station began to treat him with increasing respect as they witnessed his competence and dedication. Lyra, in particular, seemed to be re-evaluating her initial impressions. She sought him out for consultation on her research, valuing his tactical perspective on predator behaviors. During one such session, They were examining holographic projections of a large apex predator the research team had dubbed a ridge stalker. Their attack patterns show remarkable sophistication, Lyra was explaining. They somehow anticipate their prey's movements, almost as if they can predict fear responses. Kalen studied the creature's skeletal structure. Have you checked for infrasound capabilities? Some Earth predators use low-frequency sounds to induce panic in prey animals. Makes them more predictable. Lyra looked up in surprise. We haven't. That's an excellent suggestion. Just applying military tactics to biological systems, Kalen said. Fear is a weapon in any battlefield. You understand predators well, for someone who's spent his life fighting different enemies, Lyra observed. People or predators, the principles aren't so different, Kalen replied. Understand motivation, anticipate behavior, identify vulnerabilities. He paused, then added with a wry smile, and never let them see your weakness. Something in his tone made Lyra look at him more closely. Is that what your legs are to you? A weakness to be hidden. The question caught him off guard. Most people danced around the subject, never addressing it directly. They're a reality to be managed, he answered carefully. I don't hide them, but I don't give others the satisfaction of seeing them limit me either. Even when they do, Kalen's expression hardened slightly. They limit what I can do, not who I am or what I'm worth. Lyra nodded slowly, seeming to absorb this distinction. Before she could respond, an alert chimed on her datapad. The biology team is ready for the field test, she said, checking the message. We're testing a new repellent compound against the local insectoids. Would you like to observe? It could have security applications. Lead the way, Kalen agreed. The testing area was a sealed laboratory with an attached containment chamber where several small, multi-legged creatures scuttled about. Zarth was already there, along with two scientists Kalen recognized from his orientation. Commander Vance will be observing, Lyra announced as they entered. Zarth snorted. Security oversight? Or are you just bored with desk work already? Professional interest, Kalen replied evenly. Anything that keeps your research team safer in the field is my concern. The test proceeded smoothly, with the compound proving effective at repelling the insectoids without harming them. As the scientists discussed modifications to improve its range, a warning light suddenly flashed on the containment chamber's control panel. One of the scientists frowned. That's odd. The pressure seal is showing fluctuations. Before anyone could respond, a sharp cracking sound echoed through the lab as the reinforced viewing panel of the containment chamber splintered. The insectoids immediately swarmed toward the growing breach. Containment breach, Lyra shouted. Seal the lab. The automatic lockdown engaged, trapping them all in the room with the escaping creatures. The insectoids weren't large, each about the size of a human palm, but their mandibles were designed to cut through the tough exteriors of the native flora, and their toxin glands were believed to be highly potent. The emergency containment field, one of the scientists cried, pointing to a control panel across the room. Zarth moved first, darting toward the panel, but one of the creatures scuttled underfoot, causing him to stumble. He crashed into an equipment rack, sending vials smashing to the floor. The chemicals mixed, immediately producing a noxious gas that filled that corner of the lab. Kalen assessed the situation in seconds. The gas was blocking access to the containment controls. The creatures were spreading throughout the lab, and the scientists were freezing in panic. Lyra, get them into the supply closet and seal it, he ordered, pointing to a small storage room at the back of the lab. It's airtight. Without waiting for acknowledgement, Kalen moved toward the chemical spill. His cybernetic legs allowed him to vault over a lab table, avoiding the creatures on the floor. He reached Zarth, who was coughing violently in the gas cloud, eyes watering. Can you move? Kalen demanded, pulling his shirt over his nose to filter the air. Zarth nodded weakly, and Kalen hauled him to his feet, guiding him toward the supply closet where Lyra had already shepherded the scientists. Once Zarth was safely inside, Kalen turned back to face the lab, now crawling with the escaped specimens and partially filled with expanding gas. What are you doing? Lyra called from the closet doorway. Get in here. Someone has to activate the containment field, Kalen replied, his voice muffled through the fabric. The station's automatic systems will vent the gas, but not while those creatures are loose. They could get into the ventilation system. The gas, you can't breathe in that. Lyra protested. I don't need to breathe, Kalen said. He tapped the control panel on his left leg, and with a hydraulic hiss, his cybernetic limbs shifted configuration. Extra stabilizing supports extended, and the feet components widened for better traction. Military-grade enhancements. Short-term vacuum capability included. Before Lyra could object further, Kalen took a deep breath, held it, and plunged into the gas-filled section of the lab. Working methodically despite the burning in his lungs, he navigated through the swarm of insectoids to reach the control panel. His vision blurring, he activated the emergency containment field, which immediately snapped into place around the broken chamber, capturing most of the escaped specimens. Kalen then staggered to the environmental controls and initiated an emergency purge of the laboratory atmosphere. Vents in the ceiling opened, and the gas began to be sucked out of the room. Only when the air was clearing did he finally allow himself to exhale, coughing violently. As he leaned against a workstation, the door to the supply closet opened, and Lyra rushed out, followed more cautiously by the others. She reached Kalen's side, supporting him as his coughing subsided. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, she said, her voice a mixture of concern and admiration. Pragmatic, Kalen corrected between breaths. I was best equipped to handle it. You knew your cybernetics would give you an advantage in the gas, she realized. The legs have an internal oxygen supply, he explained. Emergency function for combat situations where atmosphere might be compromised. From across the lab, Zarth watched this exchange, his expression unreadable. The two scientists were already capturing the few remaining insects that had escaped the containment field. The station's safety protocols will register this as a major incident, one of them said. Director Thorne will be here any minute. As predicted, the director arrived shortly thereafter, demanding explanations. After hearing the accounts of what had happened, he turned to Kalen. Quick thinking, Commander. You prevented what could have been a serious contamination event. Just doing my job, sir, Kalen replied, his breathing now back to normal. Your job apparently includes risking your life unnecessarily, Zarth cut in. We could have waited for a proper emergency response team, by which time the specimens would have entered the ventilation system, Kalen countered. The response time would have been too long. He's right, Lyra supported. Commander Vance made the correct tactical decision, and he had the unique capabilities to execute it. Director Thorne nodded. Indeed. And speaking of unique capabilities and tactical decisions, that brings me to our next major operation. I was going to brief you all tomorrow, but since you're here, we've detected unusual seismic activity in the Northern Canyon system. It coincides with some unprecedented behavioral changes in the local fauna. What kind of changes? Lyra asked, immediately focused on the scientific implications. Mass migrations away from the area, for one, and aggressive territorial displays from species that normally avoid confrontation. The director looked troubled. We need to investigate before we lose this research opportunity. I'm authorizing a full expedition team to deploy in 48 hours. I'll begin preparing the necessary equipment, Zarth said, and I'll review the latest data to determine the best approach vectors, Lyra added. Director Thorne turned to Kalen. Commander, I want you to lead the security detail personally. This could be high risk. Understood, Sir, Kalen agreed. I'll select the team and coordinate with Specialist Shan on the approach strategy. As they left the lab, Lyra fell into step beside Kalen. You should visit medical to check for chemical exposure. I've dealt with worse, he said, but I will stop by, if only to update my medical file for this place. She studied him for a moment, then asked, Do you always minimize your achievements like that? What achievement? I held my breath and pushed some buttons. You saved lives today, Lyra said firmly, including Zartha's, who has been nothing but disrespectful to you since you arrived. Kalen shrugged. Respect is earned, not demanded. And anyway, it wasn't personal. I would have done the same for anyone. That's quite Xylosion of you. Actually, Lyra observed with surprise. Actions over words. Proof through demonstration rather than declaration. Maybe humans and Xylosians aren't so different after all, Kalen suggested with a slight smile. Maybe not, Lyra agreed, returning the smile with one of her own, the first genuine one he'd seen from her. At least some humans. The next day was consumed with preparations for the expedition. Kalen selected his security team, 4 officers with varied specialties, and coordinated with Lyra on the scientific objectives and potential risks. Zarth, responsible for equipment and transport logistics, was uncharacteristically efficient, if not exactly friendly. The terrain will be challenging, Lyra explained during their planning session, manipulating a 3D map of the canyon system. We'll need to establish a forward base here, near this ridge, then conduct survey operations in a standard pattern outward. What about these heat signatures? Kalen asked, pointing to several anomalies in the data. That's what we're going to investigate, Lyra replied. They appeared shortly after the seismic events began. They could be new geothermal features or biological, Kalen finished. Possibly predatory, given the territorial behaviors you've observed. Exactly. Lyra looked impressed at his intuition. We'll need to approach cautiously. Their planning was interrupted when Zarth entered the room, a scowl on his face. There's a problem with the expedition. No doubt. Director Thorne wants to see us immediately. In the director's office, they found Thorne reviewing equipment manifests with a concerned expression. We've had to divert some of our specialized terrain vehicles to the Southern Research Camp, he explained. They've lost contact, possibly due to the increased electromagnetic activity we've been detecting. This means we're limited in what we can deploy to the Northern Canyon. We can make do with fewer vehicles, Lyra suggested. Reduce the team size and operate more efficiently. That was my thought as well, Thorne agreed. But it means a smaller security detail too, Commander. You'll have to be selective. Kayla nodded. I can work with that. 2 officers should be sufficient if we're reducing the overall team size. There's more, Zarth added grimly. The terrain data shows the approach to our target area has become more unstable. The most direct route is now blocked by a rock slide, and the alternative path will require traversing some extremely narrow ledges. His eyes flicked meaningfully to Kalen's cybernetic legs. It will require exceptional agility and balance. Perhaps I should lead the security detail instead. Kalen felt a familiar tension settle between his shoulders. Here it was again, the assumption that his prosthetics made him less capable, less whole. My legs are fully capable of navigating difficult terrain, he said evenly. In fact, they have several advantages in unstable conditions. They don't fatigue, they're stronger than organic legs, and they have built-in stabilization systems. Theory is one thing, Zarth countered, but when lives are at stake. I've led teams through active war zones. Kalen cut in, his patience wearing thin. I've navigated collapsed structures and unstable ground under enemy fire. I think I can handle a narrow ledge. Gentlemen, Director Thorne interrupted, his tone sharp. This isn't a competition. I need my best people working together. Commander Vance will lead security, as per his assignment. Zarth, you'll be responsible for equipment and backup tactical support. Lyra will lead the scientific team. I expect full cooperation from everyone. After the meeting, Kalen found himself alone with Lyra in the corridor. She seemed troubled. What Zarth said about the terrain. Is it going to be a problem? She asked hesitantly. The question stung, but Kalen kept his expression neutral. No, it won't. I'm not questioning your abilities, Lyra added quickly. I just need to know what to expect from everyone on this mission. What you can expect from me is exactly what I've demonstrated since I arrived, Kalen said. I don't make promises I can't keep, and I don't take risks with other people's lives. Lyra studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I advocated for you to lead security before the director made his decision. This surprised him. Why? Because I've seen how you operate, she said simply. You're methodical, adaptive, and you put the mission first. Those qualities matter more than what your legs are made of. Her words carried a weight that settled in Kalen's chest. Not the familiar burden of having to prove himself, but something lighter, something like recognition. "Thank you," he said quietly. The expedition departed early the next morning. Their reduced team consisted of Kalen, 2 security officers, Lyra, 2 other scientists, and Zarth, who was piloting one of the 2 terrain vehicles. The journey to the base camp location was tense but uneventful, with the alien landscape flowing past in a blur of purples, reds, and the occasional flash of movement as native wildlife scattered at their approach. They established their forward base on a relatively flat shelf overlooking the deeper canyon system where the anomalous readings originated. As they unloaded equipment and set up sensors, Kalen noticed Zarth watching him closely each time he navigated the uneven terrain. It was irritating but predictable. "Preliminary scans are complete," Lyra announced, studying her datapad. "The seismic activity is definitely centered around that formation there." She pointed to a jagged spire of rock about 2 kilometers away, partially obscured by the canyon's twisted geography. "And the heat signatures are clustering in the same location." "What's the approach route?" Kalen asked, joining her to examine the data. Lyra's expression grew serious. "That's the complication. The main path along the canyon floor is blocked by recent rockfalls. We'll need to take the high route along the ridgeline, then descend near our target." "The high route?" one of the other scientists asked nervously. "Isn't that extremely narrow in sections?" "It is," Zarth confirmed, looking pointedly at Kalen. "Some areas are barely wide enough for a person to pass. One misstep means a fall of several hundred meters." Kalen felt the team's eyes on him, evaluating, wondering if his cybernetic legs would be a liability on such treacherous ground. "I'll scout ahead," he decided. "Map the safest route before the full team attempts it." "I'll go with you," Lyra said immediately. "That's not necessary," Kalen began. "It is," she insisted. "I need to take readings as we approach. The data changes are happening too rapidly to rely on remote sensing." Zarth stepped forward. "I should be the one to. You're needed here to maintain the base camp and coordinate emergency response if necessary," Kalen interrupted. "Specialist Shan and I will proceed to the target zone, take preliminary readings, and return to guide the rest of the team if it's safe to proceed." Director Thorne had given Kalen operational authority, and Zarth knew it. With obvious reluctance, he nodded. "Take the emergency comm unit. Signal range is limited in the canyons." An hour later, Kalen and Lyra were making their way along the narrow ridgeline that wound through the canyon system. The path was indeed treacherous, in some places no wider than half a meter, with sheer drops on either side. The alien wind whipped around them, carrying strange scents and sounds from the depths below. Kalen moved with careful precision, his cybernetic legs adjusting automatically to the uneven surface. Each step was calculated, the advanced gyroscopic systems in his prosthetics compensating for the occasional shift of loose stones or sudden gusts of wind. "You're managing well," Lyra observed as they navigated a particularly narrow section. "Did you expect otherwise?" Kalen asked, not looking back. "Honestly, I wasn't sure," she admitted. "Xylosians are naturally adapted for this kind of terrain. Our balance and reflexes evolved for environments like this. I've never seen someone with cybernetic limbs navigate something so demanding." "These aren't standard-issue prosthetics," Kalen explained, carefully testing a rock before putting his weight on it. "They're military prototypes, designed for combat in variable terrain. They actually have some advantages here, sensors that can detect structural stability, for instance." Lyra's scientific curiosity was evident in her voice. "How does the neural interface work? Do you feel the ground beneath you?" "Yes and no," Kalen said, finding it easier to talk while focusing on the path. "I have pressure and temperature feedback, but it's different from biological sensation. More data-driven, less intuitive. But after 5 years, my brain has adapted. Sometimes I forget they're not my original legs." "Until someone reminds you," Lyra said softly. Kalen didn't respond to that. They continued in silence for several minutes until they reached a wider section where the path split, one branch continuing along the ridge, the other descending steeply toward the canyon floor. "The readings are stronger from the lower path," Lyra said, checking her scanner. "But it looks unstable." Kaylin studied the descent route. It was steep and littered with loose rock, but not impossible. "I'll go first. Stay here until I signal it's safe." Before Lyra could protest, he began making his way down, using his cybernetic legs' enhanced strength to control his descent. About halfway down, he paused on a small ledge to test the stability of the next section. Suddenly, a low rumble vibrated through the canyon. Kaylin froze, instantly alert. "Seismic activity," Lyra called from above. "My scanner shows." Her warning was cut short as the rumble intensified into a violent shaking. The ledge beneath Kaylin's feet began to crumble. In a split-second decision, he launched himself forward rather than attempting to climb back up, using his legs' pneumatic systems to propel himself toward a more stable outcropping several meters away. He landed hard but secure, only to see a cascade of rocks breaking loose above, directly in Lyra's position. "Lyra, move!" he shouted. The Xylosian reacted with her species' characteristic reflexes, leaping aside as the rock fall crashed down. But the entire ridge was now unstable, shuddering and breaking apart under the intensifying tremors. Kaylin watched in horror as the section where Lyra stood collapsed entirely. She fell, a flash of blue against the red rock face, her arms outstretched in a desperate attempt to catch hold of something. Without conscious thought, Kaylin activated his legs' emergency power reserves. The prosthetics hummed with sudden energy as he calculated her trajectory and his own potential path. In combat situations, these enhancements could triple his speed and jumping capacity for short bursts, a feature he'd rarely had cause to use since his recovery. He launched himself from his position, cybernetic legs propelling him across the gap with inhuman force. The world seemed to slow as his military training took over, his mind processing distances and angles with cold precision. His body twisted midair, arms outstretched toward Lyra's. Falling form, their bodies collided with enough force to knock the breath from his lungs, but his arms locked around her securely. Now they were both falling, the canyon floor hundreds of meters below. Kaylin's hand shot out, grasping at the rock face as they plummeted. His reinforced fingers scraped against stone until they caught on a narrow ledge. The sudden stop nearly tore his shoulder from its socket, but he held on. Lyra clutched tightly against him with his other arm. "Hold on to me," he gasped. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her body trembling slightly, but her movements precise. With her secure, Kaylin activated another feature of his cybernetic legs. Powerful magnetic clamps designed for zero-gravity operations. They engaged with a metallic thunk against the iron-rich canyon wall, giving him the stability to pull them both toward a wider ledge several meters to their left. Once they reached relative safety, Kaylin released Lyra and immediately checked her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice still tight from exertion. Lyra stared at him, her violet eyes wide with shock. "No. How did you do that?" It shouldn't have been possible. Kaylin was checking his own systems, wincing at the strain warnings flashing across his neural interface. "Emergency protocols. My legs can overdrive for short periods." He looked up at the devastated path they'd been on. "We're cut off. Can't go back the way we came." Lyra activated her comm unit. "Base camp, this is Shan. We've experienced a major seismic event. The ridge path has collapsed. We're stranded on a ledge approximately 200 meters down from the original path." Only static answered her. The canyon walls were interfering with the signal. "The tremors might have damaged the relay points," Kaylin suggested. He stood carefully, testing his prosthetics. The diagnostic systems showed strain damage, but nothing critical. "We need to find another way back, or at least reach a position where communications can get through." Lyra was studying her scanner, which had somehow survived the fall. "These readings, they're off the scale now. Whatever is causing this seismic activity, we're much closer to it." She looked at Kaylin with a mixture of scientific curiosity and concern. "There's only one path from this ledge, forward," toward the source. Kaylin scanned their surroundings. She was right. The ledge they were on connected to a narrow fissure in the canyon wall that appeared to lead deeper into the rock formation. The smart move would be to stay put and wait for rescue, he said. If they can find us, Lyra pointed out, and if there isn't another quake. She gestured to the unstable rocks above them. Besides, we're here to investigate this phenomenon. We might as well complete the mission. Kaylin raised an eyebrow. That's not very Xylosian of you. Aren't your people supposed to be cautious and methodical? We're also curious, she replied with unexpected lightness, and opportunistic when necessary. She studied him for a moment. Can your legs handle more climbing? Kaylin checked his systems again. They're functional, not at full capacity, but adequate. Then let's proceed, Lyra decided. Carefully, the fissure turned out to be the entrance to a series of winding passages through the rock. As they ventured deeper, the ambient temperature rose noticeably, and Lyra's scanner showed increasingly intense energy readings. This doesn't make sense, she murmured, studying the data. These energy signatures don't match any known geothermal patterns. There's an organized structure to them, almost like what? Kaylin prompted when she trailed off. Like technology, she finished, looking up at him with astonishment. But that's impossible. This planet has no indigenous intelligent species, and there's no record of previous colonization or exploration. Before Kaylin could respond, the passage abruptly widened into a vast cavern that stopped them both in their tracks. The space was illuminated by a pulsing blue-green light emanating from what could only be described as a massive structure. Geometric, clearly artificial, and partially embedded in the rock, as if it had been there for millennia while the planet formed around it. That's not natural, Kaylin stated unnecessarily, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. It's incredible, Lyra breathed, already moving forward, scanner raised. This architecture doesn't match any known species in the Alliance database. It could be ancient, predating even Xylosian spaceflight. Kaylin caught her arm. We need to be cautious. Unknown technology is a security risk. It appears dormant, Lyra said, gently pulling away. And these readings suggest it's been here for thousands, maybe millions of years. She pointed to where the structure merged with the natural rock. See how the geological formations have grown around it? This wasn't placed here, the planet formed around it. They approached slowly, Kaylin vigilant for any sign of defensive systems or other dangers. The structure was massive, easily 100 meters high, with surfaces that seemed to shift slightly when not viewed directly, an optical effect that made Kaylin's eyes strain to focus. The seismic activity, Lyra said suddenly, consulting her scanner. It's not natural at all. It's coming from this structure. It's activating. As if in response to her words, the pulsing light intensified, and a low hum filled the cavern. Sections of the structure that had appeared solid began to reconfigure, panels sliding apart to reveal inner chambers. We need to leave, Kaylin said firmly. Now, this is beyond our mission parameters. But Lyra was transfixed, her scientific curiosity overwhelming caution. Don't you understand what this means? This could be the most significant discovery in decades. A technology so advanced that it's still operational after eons. The humming grew louder, and the ground beneath them began to tremble again. Kaylin's threat assessment systems were screaming warnings in his neural interface. Lyra, we're leaving, he said, his tone allowing no argument. That's an order. She turned to him, conflict evident in her expression. But the decision was made for them as a section of the cavern ceiling collapsed, massive rocks crashing down between them and the mysterious structure. The entire system was becoming dangerously unstable. Run, Kaylin shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm and pulling her back toward the passage they'd entered through. They sprinted through the narrow corridors as more rocks fell around them, the entire canyon system seemingly coming apart under the influence of the awakening technology. They emerged onto the ledge where they'd started, only to find that more of the path had crumbled away. They were effectively stranded, with the devastating tremors continuing to intensify. The comm unit, Kalen said, reaching for it. We need to warn the base camp. Lyra tried again, but received only static. Still no signal. The interference is worse now. Kalen assessed their precarious position. The ledge was becoming unstable, and soon it would collapse entirely. Below them was a sheer drop of at least 100 meters to a lower tier of the canyon, with no obvious way to descend safely. We have to jump, he said suddenly. What? That's suicide, Lyra protested. Not necessarily. Kalen ran calculations through his cybernetic systems. My legs can absorb the impact of a fall from this height. They're designed for combat drops. If I carry you, I can protect you from the worst of it. Lyra looked at him incredulously. Even your enhancements have limits, Kalen. This is well beyond their specifications. Do you have a better suggestion? He countered as another tremor shook loose more rocks around them. She glanced back at their crumbling position, then at the drop below, and finally at Kalen's determined face. You're serious. Completely. He moved closer to her. Put your arms around my neck and hold on as tightly as you can. Don't let go under any circumstances. Still hesitating, Lyra placed a hand on his chest. If your legs fail, then we both die, Kalen finished bluntly. But if we stay here, we definitely die. I'm giving us a chance. Another violent shake decided for them as the ledge began to give way beneath their feet. Lyra threw her arms around Kalen's neck, and he secured her against his body, one arm wrapped protectively around her. Ready, he asked. No, she replied honestly, her face pressed against his shoulder. Kalen smiled grimly. Neither am I. He stepped off the ledge. The fall seemed to last forever. Kalen positioned his body to take the full impact, angling his cybernetic legs beneath them. He activated every shock absorption system in the prosthetics, diverting all power to the impact dampeners. They hit the ground with a force that should have shattered bone. Instead, Kalen's reinforced legs compressed like springs, absorbing the tremendous energy of the fall. The strain was immense. He could feel critical warnings cascading through his neural interface as components reached and exceeded their design limits. But they held. The momentum sent them rolling across the rocky ground, Kalen maintaining his protective grip around Lyra until they finally came to a stop. For several moments, neither moved. Are we alive? Lyra finally asked, her voice muffled against his chest. Surprisingly, yes, Kalen replied, his voice strained. He loosened his hold on her. Are you hurt? Lyra carefully extracted herself from his embrace and took inventory. Bruised, but nothing seems broken. You. Kalen attempted to sit up, but fell back with a grimace of pain. My legs took most of the impact, but they're not responding correctly. He ran a quick diagnostic. The results weren't good. Several systems are offline. The power distribution network is damaged. I can still move, but not well. Lyra helped him to a sitting position, her expression concerned as she examined his cybernetic limbs. Visible damage was evident. Parts of the outer casing had cracked, exposing the complex machinery within. One leg was locked at an awkward angle. You saved my life, she said quietly. Again, part of the job description, Kalen replied, trying to mask his pain as he manually adjusted his left leg's position. Lyra's hand on his stopped the motion. Don't joke. What you did was extraordinary. Her violet eyes held his with an intensity that made him look away. No Xylosion could have survived that fall, much less protected another person through it. Before Kalen could respond, her scanner began beeping urgently. The readings were stronger than ever. The structure is fully activating, Lyra said, studying the display. And whatever it's doing is affecting the entire canyon system. We need to warn the others. Kalen nodded, attempting to stand. With Lyra's help, he managed to get upright, though he had to lean heavily on her. His right leg was functioning at minimal capacity, while the left was barely responsive, forcing him to drag it slightly. There, he said, pointing to a higher ridge about half a kilometer away. That elevation might allow the comm signal to get through. Lyra looked dubiously at his damaged prosthetics. Can you make it that far? I don't have much choice, Kalen replied grimly. Their progress was agonizingly slow. Each step was a struggle for Kalen, his damaged systems sending flares of feedback pain through his neural interface. Lyra supported him without comment, adjusting her natural grace to match his labored pace. They had covered perhaps half the distance when a new tremor, more violent than any before, shook the canyon. Massive sections of the walls began to collapse around them as the mysterious structure's activation reached a new intensity. "We need to move faster," Lyra urged, her voice tight with urgency. "You go ahead," Kalen said, releasing his hold on her shoulder. "Get to high ground and signal camp. I'll follow as best I can." "I'm not leaving you," she replied firmly. "This isn't about me," Kalen insisted. "It's about the mission. The entire research station could be at risk if that structure continues to destabilize the region. Someone needs to warn them." Lyra hesitated, clearly torn between her duty and her unwillingness to abandon him. "Go," Kalen said more softly. "I'll be right behind you. Just slower." With obvious reluctance, Lyra nodded. "I'll establish contact and come back for you immediately." She moved ahead with the natural agility of her species, quickly gaining ground toward the ridge. Kalen continued his painful progression, forcing his damaged cybernetics to respond through sheer willpower. He'd gone perhaps 50 meters when he heard a sound that chilled his blood, a deep, resonant roar that echoed through the canyon. He knew that sound. It was the battle cry of a ridge stalker, the apex predator they'd been discussing in the lab just days ago. The tremors must have disturbed its territory or driven it from its normal hunting grounds. Kalen looked up to see Lyra freeze on the path ahead, then slowly turn toward the source of the sound. Emerging from a crevice in the canyon wall was an enormous creature, at least 4 meters tall on its powerful hind legs, with a sleek, armored body and a head dominated by gleaming sensory organs and razor-sharp mandibles. It was positioned between Lyra and the ridge she needed to reach. Lyra began to back away slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. The ridge stalker tracked her with an eerie stillness, its hunting instincts evident in its poised stance. Kalen knew he couldn't reach her in time with his damaged legs. But he had one advantage. His cybernetic limbs wouldn't register as living tissue to the creature's hunting senses. He quickly accessed his neural interface, overriding safety protocols to divert all remaining power to mobility. Warning: catastrophic system failure imminent with continued operation. He ignored the alert and called out, "Lyra, stay absolutely still." Both Lyra and the predator turned at the sound of his voice. Perfect. He was drawing the creature's attention. "Kalen, don't," Lyra began, but he was already moving, his damaged legs protesting as he forced them into a shambling run directly toward the ridge stalker. The creature's attention fully shifted to this new, noisy threat. It lowered its massive head and charged toward Kalen with frightening speed. "Run for the ridge," Kalen shouted to Lyra. "Now!" As the ridge stalker bore down on him, Kalen activated his last remaining combat feature, an electromagnetic pulse designed to disrupt enemy tech, but which might also confuse the creature's sensitive organs. A wave of energy burst from his cybernetic legs, causing the predator to falter. Momentarily, in confusion, it was enough distraction for Lyra to sprint past, making for the ridge. But the creature quickly recovered, refocusing on Kalen with predatory intent. There was nowhere for him to run. His legs were failing rapidly, and the ridge stalker was between him and any potential escape route. In desperation, Kalen grabbed a jagged rock from the ground and stood his ground. If he was going to die, he'd do it fighting. The ridge stalker charged again, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of serrated teeth. Kalen braced himself for impact, knowing his chances were virtually non-existent. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the ridge where Lyra had been heading. The mysterious structure in the cavern had reached some critical activation point, releasing a wave of energy that washed over the canyon. The ridge stalker reared back, clearly disoriented by the energy pulse. In that moment of reprieve, Kalen heard a familiar voice calling his name. Not Lyra's, but Zartha's. The Xylosian warrior appeared at the top of a nearby slope, wielding what appeared to be a high-powered sonic disruptor, standard equipment for deterring the planet's dangerous fauna. Zarth fired the device, sending pulses of debilitating sound toward the ridge stalker. The creature roared in pain and confusion, caught between the mysterious energy wave and the sonic attack. "Move, human!" Zarth shouted. "I cannot hold it for long." Kalen forced his failing legs to carry him towards Zarth's position. The ridge stalker, recovering its senses, turned to follow, but was hit with another blast from the sonic weapon. It finally decided the prey wasn't worth the pain and retreated into the canyon depths with a final, frustrated roar. Kalen collapsed at the base of the slope, his cybernetic systems finally shutting down completely. He looked up at Zarth, who was already scrambling down to his position. "Lyra," Kalen gasped. "Did she make it to the comm point?" "Yes," Zarth confirmed, reaching his side. "She contacted us just before that energy wave hit. A rescue team is on the way." He examined Kalen's damaged prosthetics with a professional eye. "You cannot walk on these." "No kidding," Kalen replied weakly. "How did you find us?" "When the tremors intensified, we attempted to reach you by air. The energy disturbances prevented close approach, but we detected Lyra's comm signal and landed as near as possible." Zarth's expression was unreadable. "She said you jumped from a collapsing ledge to save her, that you carried her during the fall." "Something like that," Kalen acknowledged. "Such a fall would kill a Xylosian," Zarth said, a note of reluctant respect entering his voice. "Even one of our warriors." "Well, I had an advantage." Kalen tapped his now useless cybernetic leg. "Military-grade shock absorbers." Zarth was silent for a moment, then said, "I misjudged you, human." Before Kalen could respond, the ground began to shake violently once more. The energy pulses from the mysterious structure were increasing in frequency and intensity. "We need to move," Zarth said urgently. "The entire canyon system is becoming unstable." Without further discussion, he hoisted Kalen onto his shoulders in a fireman's carry. Despite his earlier contempt for Kalen's weakness, the Xylosian now showed no hesitation in bearing his weight. They made their way up the slope as rocks tumbled around them and the ground continued to tremble. At the top, they found Lyra waiting with the rest of the rescue team. "Kalen!" she exclaimed, rushing forward as Zarth set him down on a portable stretcher. "Your legs." "Beyond repair, I think," Kalen said, looking down at the mangled cybernetics. "Small price to pay." The rescue team worked quickly to secure him for transport as the world seemed to be falling apart around them. The energy waves from the structure were now visible in the air, rippling distortions that warped the very fabric of reality around them. "We've got to get to the shuttle," the team leader shouted over the cacophony of collapsing rock. "Now!" As they carried Kalen toward the waiting vehicle, Lyra kept pace alongside his stretcher. "The structure," she said urgently. "It's not just ancient technology, it's some kind of dimensional anchor or gateway. The readings suggest it's creating a bridge between realities." "Fascinating," Kalen replied weakly. "Maybe save the scientific briefing until we're not about to be crushed by falling rocks." Lyra actually smiled at that. "You're right. Priorities." They reached the shuttle just as a particularly violent tremor split the ground behind them. The pilot wasted no time in lifting off, narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of the canyon wall as it collapsed. From the viewport, they watched in awe as the entire canyon system seemed to fold in on itself, the mysterious structure at its center pulsing with increasingly bright energy until it was painful to look at. Directly, then, in a final cataclysmic release, the energy collapsed inward, taking much of the surrounding landscape with it before an eerie calm settled over the area. "It's gone," Lyra whispered, her scanner displaying rapidly diminishing readings. "The entire structure and a significant portion of the canyon. Just gone." "Where to?" Kalen asked. "Another dimension? Another time?" "I don't know if we'll ever be able to answer that," she replied, her scientific curiosity evident even in the face of their narrow escape. The flight back to Deep Reach 7 was mercifully uneventful. Kalen drifted in and out of consciousness, the strain of the day's events and the feedback pain from his damaged neural interfaces taking their toll. Each time he awoke, he found Lyra still by his side, monitoring his condition with obvious concern. Upon their return to the station, Kalen was immediately transferred to the medical bay. The chief medical officer, a gruff human with decades of experience in frontier medicine, examined his cybernetic legs with a grim expression. "The damage is extensive," she reported. "The neural interfaces are intact, thankfully, but the limbs themselves are beyond our capability to repair here. You'll need to return to a specialized facility." "How long will that take?" Kalen asked, already dreading the answer. "The next supply ship isn't due for 3 weeks," Director Thorne said from the doorway. He had come to check on the returning team personally. And given what's happened, the Alliance will want a full debriefing anyway. Kalen nodded, resigned to weeks of limited mobility. The medical officer provided him with a temporary solution, a basic hovering chair that would allow him to move around the station until proper replacements could be arranged. Later that evening, after the debriefings were complete and the initial reports filed, Kalen sat alone in his quarters, staring at the damaged cybernetics that had been removed from his neural ports. These legs had been part of him for 5 years, not just tools but extensions of his body and will. Seeing them broken and lifeless was disconcerting, like looking at a piece of himself that had died. A soft chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. The door slid open to reveal Lyra. She had changed from her field gear into the more comfortable clothing Xylosions preferred when off-duty, flowing fabrics that complemented their natural grace. She hesitated at the threshold. "Am I disturbing you?" "Not at all," Kalen replied, setting aside the damaged components. "Come in." She entered, her eyes taking in the cybernetic parts laid out on his desk before settling on Kalen himself, seated in the hover chair. "How are you feeling?" "Strange," he admitted. "I've gotten used to being half machine. Being just half is a new experience." Lyra moved closer, her expression thoughtful. "Yet even without your cybernetic advantages, you're still whole." Kalen looked up at her, struck by the statement. "That's not how most people see it." "I'm not most people," she replied simply. She sat on the edge of his bed, her violet eyes holding his. "I wanted to thank you properly. What you did today, it was beyond duty or protocol. You risked everything to save me." "You would have done the same," Kalen said, uncomfortable with the intensity of her gaze. "Would I?" Lyra questioned softly. "Before today, I'm not certain. My people prize natural harmony above all else. We view technological intervention as a last resort, a compromise of our essential nature." She glanced at the damaged cybernetics. "I was taught that to replace part of oneself with machinery was to lose something irreplaceable." "You wouldn't be wrong," Kalen acknowledged. "I did lose something. Sensation, certain abilities, the simplicity of not having to maintain mechanical parts." He paused. "But I gained other things." "Yes," Lyra agreed. "Strength beyond natural limits. Resilience that saved both our lives." She leaned forward slightly. "But that's not what I meant when I said you were still whole. I wasn't referring to your physical form at all." Kalen looked at her questioningly. "Your courage, your quick thinking, your willingness to sacrifice yourself for others. These are what make you whole, Kalen Vance." Her voice softened. "These are what I see when I look at you now, not machine legs or missing parts, but something extraordinary." The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. For 5 years, he had defined himself partly by his limitations, by the constant struggle to prove his worth despite his injuries. To be seen so completely, so clearly, by someone who had initially been skeptical of him was both disorienting and profoundly moving. "Thank you," he said quietly, the words inadequate for what he was feeling. Lyra reached out and took his hand. The gesture was unexpectedly intimate for a Xylosian, whose culture typically maintained careful physical boundaries with other species. "When we return to Alliance space," she said, "I would like to accompany you to the medical facility. My research into xenobiology includes some work on neural interfacing that might be relevant to your replacement prosthetics." Kalen raised an eyebrow. "You're offering to help design my new legs?" "If you would permit it," she replied. I have some ideas for improvements based on what I've observed of your current models. Adaptations that might better integrate the technological and biological systems. Dr. Shan, Kalen said with mock formality. Are you proposing a research project with me as the subject? Lyra's lips curved in a smile. Perhaps, but my interest is not purely scientific. Before Kalen could respond to that intriguing statement, another chime at the door announced a visitor. Enter, Kalen called, reluctantly releasing Lyra's hand. The door opened to reveal Zarth, his imposing frame filling the doorway. He looked uncomfortable, his usual confidence replaced by an awkward stiffness. Commander Vance, he acknowledged. His eyes flicked to Lyra, then back to Kalen. I can return later if this is not a convenient time. It's fine, Kalen assured him. What can I do for you? Zarth entered the room, but remained standing, his posture rigid. I wish to. That is. He faltered, then seemed to gather his resolve. I came to offer my assistance during your period of recovery. Until your replacements arrive, you will require help with certain tasks. I am volunteering my services. Kalen blinked in surprise. That's very generous, Zarth, but not necessary. The medical staff has provided everything I need. It is not a matter of necessity, Zarth said firmly. It is a matter of honor. You have proven yourself a warrior worthy of respect. Among my clan, it would be shameful to allow such a warrior to struggle without support from his comrades. The word comrades hung in the air between them, a significant shift from the antagonism that had characterized their relationship until now. I accept your offer, Kalen said, understanding the cultural importance of his response. Thank you. Zarth nodded, seeming relieved. His eyes moved to the damaged cybernetic components on the desk. These were well-crafted, he observed, approaching to examine them more closely. But the power distribution system is inefficient. The damage might have been less severe with a more decentralized approach. That's exactly what I was thinking, Lyra interjected, her scientific interest piqued. A biomimetic network similar to the redundant neural pathways in Xylosian limbs could significantly improve resilience. Combined with reinforced joint articulation, Zarth added, warming to the topic. The stress fractures occurred primarily at the connection points. Kalen looked between the two Xylosians with amazement as they discussed potential improvements to his prosthetics with growing enthusiasm. Zarth, who had mocked his machine legs days ago, was now analyzing their design with professional respect. Lyra, who had initially regarded his cybernetic enhancements with scientific detachment, was now passionate about improving them. As they continued their technical discussion, pulling up reference materials on data pads and sketching concepts, Kalen felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with proving himself or overcoming limitations. These people weren't defining him by what he lacked, but by what he had demonstrated he could do. The next 3 weeks passed quickly. True to his word, Zarth provided assistance when needed, but more importantly, he treated Kalen as an equal, seeking his tactical input on security matters and including him in training sessions where he could participate from his hover chair. The rest of the station personnel followed suit, no longer seeing him as the broken soldier, but as the officer whose actions had saved lives during a crisis. Lyra divided her time between analyzing the data from the mysterious structure and working with Kalen on designs for his new prosthetics. Their professional collaboration gradually evolved into something more personal as they shared stories of their respective worlds and experiences. She was fascinated by his accounts of Earth and human culture. He was equally intrigued by her descriptions of the Xylosian homeworld with its high gravity and vibrant ecosystems. On the evening before the supply ship was due to arrive, Director Thorne organized a small gathering in the station's recreation area. The official purpose was to review the findings from the Canyon expedition, but it quickly became apparent that it was also a send-off for Kalen, who would be departing for medical treatment. Thanks to Commander Vance and Specialist Shan, we've documented what may be the most significant archaeological discovery in decades. Thorne announced to the assembled staff. The Alliance Science Division is already preparing a full research expedition to explore what remains of the site. Kalen, seated in his hover chair with Lyra standing beside him, accepted the congratulations of his colleagues with quiet dignity. When Zarth approached, holding a small metallic object, the room fell curiously silent. "Commander Vance," Zarth said formally, "among my people, warriors who have proven exceptional courage are honored with a symbol of their achievement." He held out the object, a small medallion inscribed with Xylosian characters. "This is called a Valoran. It signifies that you have earned the respect of the warrior caste." Murmurs rippled through the room. The offering of a Valoran to a non-Xylosian was extremely rare. "I am honored," Kalen said sincerely, accepting the medallion. "Thank you, Zarth." The Xylosian nodded, then added with unexpected warmth, "You may have machine legs, human, but you have a warrior's heart. That is what truly matters." Later, when the gathering had dispersed and most of the station personnel had retired for the night, Kalen found himself alone with Lyra in the observation lounge. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the alien stars through the viewport. "Will you return?" Lyra asked finally. "After your medical leave?" "If the Alliance approves my request," Kalen replied. "I've put in for a permanent posting here." Lyra turned to him, her expression brightening. "You have. The work here is important," he said. "And the people, well, they've grown on me." "Any people in particular?" Lyra asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Kalen met her gaze. "One in particular." She moved closer, her hand finding his. "I've been authorized to accompany you to the medical facility as a scientific liaison," she said, "to consult on the neural interface adaptations. Is that the only reason you're coming?" Kalen asked softly. "No," Lyra admitted. "That's just the official reason." Her free hand rose to touch the side of his face gently. "The truth is, I've discovered something unexpected during our time together." "What's that?" "That sometimes the most extraordinary connections form where we least expect them," she said. "Between different species, different worlds, between flesh and machine. A natural harmony after all," Kalen suggested, recalling their earlier conversations about Xylosian philosophy. "Yes," Lyra agreed. "Just not the kind I was taught to recognize." As she leaned toward him, closing the distance between them, Kalen reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The battle that had cost him his legs, the years of rehabilitation and struggle to prove his worth, the initial skepticism and prejudice he'd faced upon arriving at Deep Reach 7. All of it had led to this moment of connection with someone who saw him not for what he had lost, but for what he had become. When their lips met in a gentle kiss, transcending the biological differences between their species, Kalen Vance finally felt truly whole. Not despite his mechanical parts, but with them, accepted completely for exactly who and what he was. In that moment, beneath the alien stars, a former soldier with cybernetic legs and an alien scientist who had once viewed such technology with suspicion found something neither had expected. A future where differences were not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. A future they would explore together, one step at a time.